Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are back for another free agency episode. We're going to go over the free agency winners and losers, and it kind of caps off our free agency coverage because a month from now, we'll be having the NFL draft. So we cannot wait. We're going to start getting to some of the guys coming out. Obviously, pro days have been happening over the last couple of weeks, and then we also might do some early bit of rankings. Just to kind of get in the excitement of what's coming. But yeah, how you doing today, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, I'm doing well. I mean, how can you not in this fabulous offseason as we get to the road to the draft? I'm excited to talk about these teams. Free agency is pretty much for the most part, Justin, wrapped up here. And we're now, gearing towards the draft just a month away. And how exciting that's going to be in a loaded draft, Justin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, and just can't wait to dive into this. But in primarily, we got to dive into some of Dween Sports daily news. Big news came out this week. Some NFL rule changes. Obviously, I think most of these are 1 year, tested out rules, but they're kind of big. All three of them can have major impacts to the game. We're going to start out with the first one. I think the one that's been most talked about, at least by a lot of players. The hip drop tackle is now banned. Players will get 15, or I guess usually the defense will get a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first. Those plays like Tony Pollard getting injured against San Francisco in the playoffs. I know Mike Williams got hurt, a couple of years ago. Mark Andrews was another story
Mm-hmm.
from this past year. But yeah, Genoa, what are your thoughts on the banning of the tackle?
Oh man, it's very impactful just because now you got to think about how defensive coaches and coordinators are going to approach this going into the summer and training camp. It's going to change, a little bit of how they tackle. They're going to be a little bit more, I guess they'll help themselves out as best they can. But Justin, it's going to happen eventually. It's just a natural way. If you're, there's 2 or 3 yards away from the first down, you're just going to be some type of way to tackle. It's not really planned. This is how football is. But there's going to be some penalties. It's going to cause a lot of confusion for these defenders, and these coordinators are going to take a year, maybe two, to catch up to this rule. So it definitely favors the offense, Justin, because now the defense is really going to really think about hard about how they're going to approach this tackle. And not cost their team, a penalty or even them getting kicked out of the game. So it's going to be very impactful. We're going to see a lot of confusing, penalties, and some defensive players are going to look confused. So I'm very curious to see how this goes going forward.
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck in the middle, but I'm gonna go with I think this is a good move for football. People are not happy about it. At least players or defenders are like, how are we
Yeah.
gonna tackle these guys now? But they said I think it happened about on average about once a game. I think there was like 230 or something that happened this past season, and those injuries they just look gruesome. It's so painful probably for the offensive player, and I know we're kind of limiting defenders' ways to tackle, but I think it's an essential move. Unlike I think with the kickoff, which we can segue to, the
Mhm.
kickoff's got a whole new look now, guys. We got I guess so. We're gonna have the kicker, by himself for now. At I believe the 30 or 35, maybe in the 40 still. He's gonna boot it down to the receiver, and now it's what I think they're 10 yards apart or 5 yards
Yeah.
apart, and they can't run until the receiver obtains possession or if it lands in the zone of where. Man, I got to dive into that more, but I think it's very similar or maybe even identical to the XFL rules. And
Yeah.
man, I know it's they speak that it's going to be an increase to kickoff return touchdowns now, just because it's less of, I mean, everybody's just hauling their butt all the way down the field, 30, 40 yards, which will also limit injuries. But I don't know. I'm going to miss the old way of kickoffs. Just I think how rare kickoffs were or are now might be something less special now that
Yeah.
this is just a whole different rule. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the new kickoff rules?
I think it favors the offense by far now. I mean, when you have the two teams barely 10 yards apart, it gives the kick returner a little bit more spacing instead of getting tackled around the 25 or 30. We're potentially talking about 40 to 45, maybe even to 50.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see who's going to score the first touchdown off of this, Justin. But it looks very weird. I saw the XFL clips. It seems just unethical. It just doesn't seem like something I am a fan of. Obviously, we'll all get used to it, Justin.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna miss the traditional way of kickoffs just because I feel like every team had the advantage. But now, Justin, we're talking about putting offenses at like the 40 or 50 yard line to start each drive, which is good for fantasy. But I mean, I'm not sure how to feel about it, Justin.
Yeah, and I just looked this up. I mean, obviously, arguably the best kick returner in the history of our game, Devin Hester. He only had 5
Mm-hmm.
kickoff return touchdowns in his career. Um,
Oh,
I think like sooner or later that's going to be broken. Like
yeah.
with the fact that like it's going to be just so much easier. I mean, less. I don't know, just how the field is set up, how the players are set up. Obviously, it's geared towards offense, and I know actually offensive scoring has been down over the last couple of years, so they're probably trying to make their
Mhm.
ways to make it more interesting. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna deal with it. Obviously, we might have our complaints here and there, but you know we adapt. That's what
Yeah.
we do. We adapt. So
Mhm.
as will teams, and I think it's fair to point out with these new rules, like all these teams are going to have to try to adapt. It might not be, a very easy transition. Same with the referees. So a lot of changes. It might start off kind of rocky. And
Yeah.
then that leads me to the last one, which I'm more of a fan of. It's that the head coaches now, if you get 2 challenges correct, you actually have the opportunity of getting a third one, which will, I mean, helps maybe. I mean, I don't see too many challenges for it to be too necessary.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in if they had like a 2-minute warning where you could throw a challenge, because I know now. I mean, obviously they can't. No challenges under 2 minutes, at least to half. Um, but I feel like that would have helped. So maybe this is more of like a indifferent on that one. But yeah, give me your take on that.
Yeah, it's hardly ever happened, Justin, where they've gotten 2 challenges right in one game. I've never really seen that being the thing, although it can happen. I know the year after, I believe the Rams and Saints faced each other in the NFC title game. They wanted to review flags. I remember that was the thing where maybe a coach or a team would get 2 successful challenges, but I didn't really see it this much this year. Maybe I didn't pay attention much to it. But hey, it could come critical to a team that's trying to win a game. Coming from behind something like that. Maybe it's a game later on in the year that has playoff implications. But we hardly ever see a team get it twice right. They might challenge it twice, might get it one wrong, one right, or two or both wrong. So it'll be very interesting. These new rules are exciting to see who becomes most successful out of it. Who can get
Yeah.
those 3 challenges? Who can get that first kickoff touchdown? Stuff like that. So these new rules are. I'm not the biggest fan of, Justin, but hey, it's football. This is our sport and we're gonna, I guess, get used to it.
Yeah, and actually, that you reminded me of one thing. A rule that I guess was not put in place. The tush push is still legal, and the Eagles will continue to use it. I think I would say I think it hurts Saquon's value just a little bit. I don't think if they're on the one, they're going to be like, "Oh, we paid Saquon, we're going to use it." No, I think they're going to give their 99% effective tush push at the 1 or even the 2-yard line. So, Jalen Hurts owners, be happy. It's sticking around, even though no Kelsey. So we'll see if Kelsey was the man behind
Yeah.
that success. So that's where I think we're heading into next year. But yeah, do you kind of raise Jalen Hurts' stock a little bit, or Saquon's down? How are you looking at it?
Well, it's we really have to see who they get at center, because if it's at the goal line, yes, Jalen Hurts. But if you know how they did a lot of tush push, even on 4th and 1 on any line, it could have been in their own 20, at the 40, at the 50. They're still running, tush pushes. If it's at the end, the goal line, I love it. But I think as time goes on, I think eventually the tush push would be, figured out. I feel like maybe this is something you should run only inside the 20 on the red zone and the
Sure.
opponent's territory. Not like a. It just I'm a little old fashioned. I like to hand it off to the my power back, or especially the guy that you mentioned that they just paid in Saquon Barkley. I
Yeah.
do. I like I mentioned, it is going to get figured out outside the 20. In scoring range, I do think that it'll still be tough to figure out. Stop.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, after all these rule changes and lack thereof, I'm kind of like, we're gonna go right in the middle. Just like it's all
Mhm.
right. Obviously,
Yeah.
we'll see how it works. I think it will be a little rocky at the beginning, but that's what we got on Dween Sports Daily News. We're gonna move into our main segment of the day: free agency winners and losers. Last couple episodes we dove into by position. by singular player that signed with the new team. Today's a little bit of a different swing. Now we are going to talk about some guys that signed with new teams, but also maybe a guy that signed with a team and now is helping or diminishing another guy that was already on the team. So, and then we're also talking about, team by team who we're like, the 53 men that are going to be better this year or worse this year. So we're going to start with our third. All right. I'm going to defer to you to start us today. Who is your third winner of free agency by team?
By team, I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears, Justin. I feel like now, you look at their offense. I know you're not the biggest fan of Swift, but Justin, just give him a chance. I promise he will be one of those good running backs out of the backfield catching. So you have Swift. Now you have DJ Moore, who you traded for in last year's, draft haul to get for Carolina to get Bryce Hall. And now we add Keenan Allen. So we have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore with Swift in the backfield. We love Cole Kmet. He could be a stud tight end, a top 5 tight end, Justin. And now you still own the number 1 pick overall, Justin, to get Caleb Williams. I love Caleb Williams. People are asking me my questions on Caleb Williams. I think he's obviously a generational talent. I think he's better than the last couple of years when we had like Trevor Lawrence go number 1 overall. I think he's better than Trevor. I'm not sure if he's better than Burrow yet as far as, the last 5 number 1 picks overall that were all quarterbacks. But there's a couple out there that you could say Caleb Williams is better of. He's generational, but there's still some work to be done with Caleb Williams.
Sure.
But I do like Chicago now in that division now, Justin. You got to think about it now. The Lions soared through that, division. They made it to the NFC Championship. They're an entertaining team to watch. They're going to be the favorites to win that division. Now you have Green Bay now, who made a stretch late in the year, was able to make the playoffs, won a playoff game. Now they're another top team in that division. So now with Chicago, they've always got beaten down by Green Bay historically. Who's going to be their transitional quarterback, like Aaron Rodgers, a guy like Favre that can get their kind of revenge on the Packers, Justin? So I think for Bears fans, it's very exciting on now this offense. We're still not 100% on this coaching, Justin. I still am very skeptical about the coaching, but as far as talent, I do think the Bears have it.
Yeah, Ryan Poles has set up the Bears to be major winners in free agency, in my opinion. I have him at third too. With bringing in Keenan Allen, that was an absolute steal. Swift, although I'm not a big fan of him, it's an upgrade to the running back room. And then even Gerald Everett, I'm assuming they're going to move to 12 personnel, having 2 tight ends on the field. Because they don't really have a third wide receiver at the moment, even though they've been rumored to get one at their 9th overall pick. But I like what they set up Caleb Williams very nicely. And their offensive line is still a work in progress. But if they get a guy at 9, maybe it could be very good for Caleb. And yeah, we're not big fans of the coaches, which I think will inevitably hold them back this year. But it couldn't be better on the field, on-field talent. They re-signed Jalen Johnson, so I think the Bears are major winners, and they're my third as well. Since we kind of covered that, I'm going to jump to my 2, and then we'll jump to your 2. And my 2 is the Tennessee Titans. It's been something. I feel like they were written off kind of going into this next season, and we're not even into April yet, and they've kind of been written off. Just Will Levis, a lot of people don't think he's the guy. Derrick Henry left. He's in Baltimore now. What were they going to do? They signed Calvin Ridley. They signed Tony Pollard. We think they're going to get a good guy in the draft at 7. So I think they'll handle that there. Chidobe Awuzie is a very underrated signing. He's a cornerback. And then, of course, they trade for L'Jarius Sneed. They're setting up Will Levis and just the entire team, even the defense, is set up for a revolution of sorts, in my opinion. I mean, even in the years of Mike Vrabel, where their defense was pretty good and they were having lower scoring games, their secondary was a major weakness. They get L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie to clear that up. I am all on it. They even signed Lloyd Cushenberry, who I'm a big fan of, the offensive lineman. And so things are going well for the Tennessee Titans. They're right in the thick of this race now, in my opinion. And if Will Levis shows some promise, watch out. Houston might have some more competition. And I think that only kind of puts Jacksonville at a slant downward. with the
Yeah.
the upgrades that Tennessee has made. So Tennessee, my second free agency winner. Who you got as your second?
Well, Justin, I wanted to put Tennessee in there, but I'm glad you covered all aspects, which makes me feel better about putting the Falcons at number two, Justin.
Okay, yeah,
Look, I think the Falcons, they remind me a little bit of those young McVay Rams when they first had, Todd Gurley and Jared Goff, Robert Woods. I think Cooper Kupp was barely coming on the scene with Brandon Cooks ahead of him. They already had Aaron Donald already, becoming one of the young, great defenders who just retired last week, Aaron Donald, so happy retirement. But anyways, with the Falcons, Justin, they have now a pretty entertaining offense. Cordell Patterson just signed with the team today, so he's no longer in Atlanta. So now you have Bijan Robinson leading the way. Yes, you still have Algier behind him, but Bijan's no doubt going to be the bell cow for that team. Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Oh, and you add Kirk Cousins, who can work that offense the best of the ability. I love the Falcons. If they can just draft defense in this year's draft, get some young studs, kind of like how, the Lions did a few years back, this team is going to be the runaway winner in the NFC South, Justin, against teams like the Saints, who aren't that, competitive with a quarterback yet, with the Panthers are still figuring out with Bryce Young, and the Buccaneers, who, yes, just won the division, but I do think they take a step back a little bit just with sticking with Baker, who I've never been the biggest fan of. So I do like Kirk Cousins, who has experience in winning, being the top of that division a few years in a row, even with Aaron Rodgers when he was in Minnesota, when Kirk was in Minnesota. So I feel like, now this gets a little bit easier for this division to be won. I love Raheem Morris as the head coach. He's one of the young, head coaches that been around for a while and now has this opportunity to lead a team now. So I like the Falcons. I mean, they added a couple other players, on offense that we talked about last week. And I think it's just going to boost everybody on that team up. They're all going on the right direction, and especially for fantasy.
yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
stole. I mean, they're my first team. I'll dive into them in a brief second. But yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal what they did. I guess I'll kind of just jump to my one because they are my one. Atlanta, just I mean, Desmond Ritter to Kirk Cousins is just a colossal upgrade. Which I mean, that's really all they needed to be a major winner in free agency. But they also, they upgraded at wide receiver. I really like the Darnell Mooney signing. Even the Rondell Moore trade is a solid move. And I'm looking here, they even got Ray McLeod. So
Mm-hmm.
they got speed now on this offense, and they got a reliable quarterback to use. Obviously, yeah, the defense, a good edge rusher is something they'll probably address at the 8th pick with maybe a Dallas Turner or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they've set themselves up perfectly in a division that is still, yeah, like meddling in the middle. I mean, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
Baker Mayfield returning without Dave Canales. I'm a little skeptical. And then the Saints, again, I feel like they haven't really done anything. And then Carolina will be improved, but from what the worst record in the league. So
Yeah.
Atlanta is set up for success. They're my free agency winners, hands down. Bijan, Kirk, Mooney, Drake London, which I'm going to hint that to something later, and then Kyle Pitts. It's phenomenal what they're getting to do, and then they have a good defensive-minded head coach and a pretty strong quarterback coach is now their offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson. So huge fan of Atlanta, as you mentioned, and yeah, who's your winner? Who's your big takeaway?
My winner is the Eagles, Justin. I mean, when you look at this offense, they get better now. Look, before I get into the Saquon, I like what they did with the wide receiver three. Now, Devontae Parker hasn't been heard of for the past couple years, but as a wide receiver three, Justin, in that offense, I like it to go
I
under
agree.
Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, and also you have Goddard, who they signed for the next couple years. He's a pretty solid tight end. He missed the middle part of the season, was able to come back at the end. I know that the offense was struggling. Now they have Saquon. And with the Eagles, Justin, historically under Nick Sirianni, they're a couple years already together. I think it's 3. They've been able to run the ball really well. The first year they had like Boston Scott and Miles Sanders, and then last year they had like Swift and Gainwell, who's had some pretty good games here and there under the Sirianni era. And now you have Saquon Barkley now, who you have Saquon and you have Jalen Hurts. I mean, this is as good as a backfield as they have in Baltimore now. So you got to make the argument that's one of the best, backfields in general. Saquon, he's going to be a beast. I know the tush push is going to get in the way of his thing, but he's going to have his 6 to 7, maybe 10 total touchdowns in the year, probably about 14 to 1,500 yards out of the scrimmage. So this offense is going to be just fine. And we've mentioned in other episodes, Justin, that there's never been like repeat winners in the NFC East. So this past year, Dallas won it. So you can make the argument now that this is Philly's year to win the division and get back to being the NFC's top seed, and to make it back to the Super Bowl. I'm just a big believer in Jalen Hurts. I'm believing that he is going to, if he's healthy, he is going to lead the Eagles to a top 1 to 2 seed. I think they should be better, a little bit better than San Francisco, maybe Dallas this year as far as NFC teams. So add, Saquon, who's an upgrade to Swift, who did pretty good already, but now you have Saquon. If he's healthy, and they did release a couple pieces on their defense, but I do think with Howie Roseman and how aggressive he is in the draft, they're always gonna get star caliber defensive players, as they already have with those Georgia players that they drafted in the last 2 drafts. So give me Philly next year, and I think I might want to put them as the NFC's number 1 seed next year. So look out for the Eagles.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I like hearing you say that. And Saquon is by far their best running back they've had probably since LaShawn McCoy. So, I mean, that's set up perfectly there. Yeah, they lose, Fletcher Cox. He retires. But they bring in Bryce Huff from the Jets. That's a money move. C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That's another good, solid move. They need secondary help. They still do. And Howie Roseman is a wizard. He'll bring in someone in the draft. And then who else did they bring in? They brought in one more. Oh, Devin White from the Buccaneers.
Yeah, Devin White's going to be good.
He's a very good linebacker. Even though he didn't have a great year this past season, but part of that Super Bowl run with Tom Brady a couple years ago. So yeah, Philly's a great one. That's a good. That would have been a good honorable mention for me. I think one more good honorable mention that I think we both can firmly agree on: the Houston Texans are a winner in free agency. Danielle Hunter. I mean, first off, actually roll that back. I remember starting free agency a few hours in. We're like, what is Houston doing? We hadn't heard anything. They lose Jonathan Grenard. They lose Blake Cashman, and we're like, wow, we are fumbling our opportunity here. And then by get Dalton Schultz back, then the big Danielle Hunter signing, Aziz Al-Shaair, Joe Mixon gets traded here, and it's just a lot of very good moves, a lot of good role player moves like Jeff Okudah, C.J. Henderson, Denico Autry, underrated signing of for the Texans, 11.5 sacks for the Titans last year. So they lose Grenard, who had, I believe, 12. And they replace it with 11.5 and Danielle Hunter. So they are major winners, and they kind of cement themselves now as a top 3 to 4 team in the AFC for sure. So I love the Houston Texans. Give me your 2 cents on what Houston was able to do.
Yeah, no, I love that they were able to beef up that D-line a little bit to go along with Will Anderson. They already invested their future on their defensive side behind Will Anderson. They have Jalen Petrie. And they have Stingley on that secondary. So they're kind of adding up. I do think Houston's looking to add a little bit more at the linebacker position, just a little bit, just because we also lost Cashman as well. And so I think a middle linebacker, maybe an outside. I do like Christian Harris on the outside. He's been really good. He had a wild card game against the Browns. And so, that defense, little by little, Justin's looking good. They're adding pieces on the secondary. You mentioned a few cornerbacks. They had some pass rushers now on each side. They have Danielle Hunter and Will Henderson. They did lose their D tackle. I think it was Collins. They're going to add some. I'm confident they're going to get some, studs defensive through the draft. And so I like it. They were able to bring back, Schultz, who, is C.J. Stroud's, security blanket when he's not able to get to Nico, or even after Tank Dell, went out. So, the offense is looking good. I'm just so excited to see what we're going to do in the draft. We just need our receivers and linebackers. And I think, like you mentioned, we will be a, top 3 to 4 team in the AFC.
Yeah, and I know me, you, Josiah, Johannan, that's his brothers. We're all fantasy guys, but we've been talking about Edgerrin Cooper as a Houston Texan. He's an Aggie, and that's a perfect fit. But yeah, anyway, okay.
Yep.
So, past all the good news, we got to change course, and we're going to talk about the bad news, the losers of free agency. And there's a number of them. Since I think I started last time, I want to jump to you. Who's your number 3 loser of free agency?
Number 3 loser. I'm going to start off with the Giants. Now, they're already trending downward already, right? But now, they lose Saquon to Philly, to a divisional rival now, Justin. And now, Justin, they fall to the worst team by far in that division because I mentioned Philly. They're going to be the number one seed in the NFC if they're healthy. And then with Dallas, they're still going to be a force to be reckoned with. They have a pretty good offense. They're experienced. They're going to be back in the mix. And Washington, they're going on the up, Justin, with those two running backs in Eckler and Brian Robinson. They have pretty decent wide receivers in, and they own the second pick in the draft. But with the Giants, Justin, they don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They signed Drew Lock. There was a report this week that they're 50-50 on Daniel Jones. It might be the end of Jones in New York. And they don't have any offensive talent at all, Justin. Waller looks like to not be returning. They never really had a dynamic receiver to begin with. I do like Jalen Hyatt, but he did not show too much flashes as a rookie, as most rookies do, Justin, at the wide receiver position. So that offense is just awful, Justin. I mean,
Yeah.
and their defense, they weren't able to get some pieces, but not so much to make them a pretty good team. I do think they own the seventh pick in the draft. Nope, fourth,
Six.
sixth. Okay, sixth pick in the draft. We're not really sure what they're doing. If they go like Malik Neighbors, they get a receiver. Who's their quarterback? And if they go quarterback, who's going to be the guy that they're throwing to? They already have Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. And if they go defensive player, I mean, they already have Thibodeau, and it's just anywhere the Giants do, anything the Giants do, I just don't think they win at all this year, Justin. In fact, I think they might be the worst team now going into this year. They might have the first pick overall. So they better be scouting whoever's good in college football this year because I don't think the Giants make many noise. I don't even think they get to 3 wins. So they're definitely the biggest loser. Weren't able to get any talent offensively. If they were to get like a Kirk Cousins, if we were to get Kirk Cousins and then draft Neighbors with their 6th pick, I would have loved them on the upcome, but that's not something they were able to do. They still have Daniel Jones, who they paid all that money to lose Saquon. I'm just not liking it. I feel bad for Dable. He's one of the better coaches out there. Coach of the year just a year ago. But I don't like the Giants at all, and they're the biggest loser for me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I had them right on the outside. My first loser is the Cleveland Browns. And
Ooh.
they're going to be a good team still, right? I mean, they have a roster, but if you look at it, all around them, everybody's getting better. I mean, the Bengals, they were able to franchise tag T. Higgins. I know he requested a trade, but he's still on the team. They signed Trent Brown. They get a pretty good replacement in Zach Moss. They lose Chidobe Awuzie, but they give Von Bell back. So, they're kind of maintaining. And if you look at the Browns, though, I look at it more as I feel like the moves they made are questionable. Now, look, they lose Joe Flacco. Yeah, he did great. He won Comeback Player of the Year. They get Jameis Winston. I'm like, all right, they got their backup. Then they signed Tyler Huntley. And I'm like, did you need another quarterback? You have DTR2 behind them. Then you look at the running back room. They got Chubb coming back from injury. They have Jerome Ford, who played very well. Then they signed Naeem Hines. I'm like, oh, that'll be a good backup. And then they signed another running back. They signed who is it right here? Oh my gosh, why am I? Okay, maybe they did not, but okay, no. So anyway, and then
They can always bring back Kareem Hunt.
oh my God, it's always a thing. And then the last one, Jerry Jeudy. They trade for Jerry Jeudy. Good for them. They didn't give up too much for it. Then they pay him a 3-year, $58 million deal, and I'm like, question why they did that. I question when they traded for Deshaun Watson and gave him the whole bag. So it's just to me like not moves that kind of upgraded them to a status of like where the Houston Texans are, in my opinion. I think they're kind of falling out of it more. That's why I have them in the losers category. And jumping to the next one, another loser I had was the Los Angeles Chargers. Los Angeles, you guys. I mean, Herbert kind of, going into last year, we were like, he's got Keenan Allen, he's got Mike Williams, he's got Austin Eckler, he's got a first-round pick in Quentin Johnston. Now he's got Quentin Johnston, maybe Josh Palmer. Obviously, we like Palmer better than QJ, but it's rough. I think it's very rough for Justin Herbert, especially his fantasy value. And as for the team, I love the coaching hire. The coaching hire saves any more bad talk about them, but just like it to me, it's bleak as to what in a division that's very competitive. I mean, I don't think Denver's going to be worse. I think Peyton will get his quarterback, and then he can groom him in the way he wants to. Obviously, the Chiefs improved with Hollywood signing. and keeping Chris Jones, and the Raiders too. I think they did pretty well with Christian Wilkins signing. So I don't know with the Chargers. I mean, they kind of been in cap hell. This past year, they got Khalil Mack, who was owed a lot, and Joey Bosa. They get rid of Keenan Allen. They get rid of Mike Williams. I think that's major. That is a
Yeah.
major, stab in the heart for them. So I have them as a big loser, my second loser. But yeah, Jano, who do you have as your second loser from free agency?
So Justin, I actually have the Chargers on my list as well. They're not the biggest loser, but I'm just gonna touch up on what you said about the Chargers since they're already on my list. I do feel like they have left Justin Herbert out by himself. It's kind of like that Fresh Prince meme when Will Smith is like in the room all by himself. I feel like pretty much, he has nobody to get the ball to. He has no Eckler, no Keenan Allen, who I would have loved to seen Keenan Allen in a Jim Harbaugh system, Justin. I just feel like he's able to develop stars and make them better as he did in San Francisco. But it sucks we're not going to be able to get Keenan Allen in a Jim Harbaugh system. They also get rid of Mike Williams, who was Justin Herbert, his deep threat, his like Mike Evans, his one-on-one guy. So they lose a lot, Justin. I mean, it's just very sad how they weren't able to capitalize on having a franchise quarterback, Justin.
Yeah.
And a pretty good head coach who's coming off a championship. They weren't able to get him star talent. Now, I do think Justin, off the bat with the Chargers, they're going to need to get to pick a wide receiver. I don't care what they feel like they need. They need to get a wide receiver to start the. I mean, obviously Marvin's probably going to go third or fourth. So let's go ahead and get Neighbors or Odunze. I mean, let's get a receiver. Let's get Herbert, a number one guy, because we are not going to be able to compete with the Chiefs, Justin, who now have Hollywood, Rashee Rice to go along with Travis Kelsey. I mean,
Yeah.
that they're not going to be able to win anything in that division with the Raiders on the upcome. But Justin, with the Chargers, I do feel like with Harbaugh, they're always going to have that ability to develop new and good talent. I just feel like through the draft, they're going to need to get 1 to 2 pass catches for Justin Herbert. If they go Brock Bowers in the first, I wouldn't hate it. But they got to give Herbert some type of pass catcher, preferably in the first 3 rounds.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally. You got
Mhm.
it right on the nose. But I will offer, with the rumors that the Cardinals might be trading out of 4, just say a hypothetical Minnesota flies in there, they get the 4th pick, they get their quarterback. That would leave LA with Marvin Harrison, and that would literally shoot Marvin Harrison to the moon. I think
Oh yeah.
that's like the best landing spot you could hope for with him, with Justin Herbert, with Jim Harbaugh. I mean, things could be very pretty if Marvin can land to 5. If a team like Minnesota, jumps and gets into that Arizona spot. So I'm liking that. And now we're gonna move to
Yeah.
our last loser here. What is your last loser of free agency?
My biggest loser, Justin, is the Broncos. Just an absolute mess. The Broncos and the Giants are going to be competing probably for the first pick overall next year. Looking at the Broncos now, they have the edge over the Giants because they do have some pretty good running backs. They do have, Javonte Williams, who was a stud a couple years ago in fantasy before he got hurt. We like Jaleel McLaughlin as one of those sleeper picks, maybe a dynasty guy. I like Marvin Mims Jr., who showed some flashes. And they just have a bunch of injuries. They don't have a star defensive player as of yet besides Sertan. So they're really trending the wrong direction. As far as the draft, they're gonna need to get a quarterback. Um, they might go Penix, but it's gonna be tough to see how they move the ball. They don't have enough playmakers. I think Sean Payton's a little over his head right now, a little stubborn, a little stuck up. Even though I feel like he's one of the better offensive play callers in the league, but I just feel like Sean Payton's getting a little stubborn on how he's taking over the Broncos. He thinks this is the Saints in some ways. I wouldn't even be surprised if they signed Michael Thomas week 2. So I just feel like the Broncos don't really have an identity at all. And this division just gets so much easier, Justin, for Patrick Mahomes to make another AFC Championship appearance. Just because this division just doesn't try, Justin. We just mentioned the Chargers not being able to add talent around Herbert, and now with the Broncos not even be able to add talent, period. When they had Russell the past couple years, so maybe the Raiders can do something about the Chiefs, but with the Broncos, they're probably going to be as bad as the Giants. I don't even trust them to get to 5 wins. And they don't have a good draft spot to get one of those top guys at quarterback. If they end up with Penix, I just don't like that situation for Penix. Um, it seems to me that they might just go with Stidham and get a receiver, but other than that, I'm not really liking the way the Broncos are building their team to knock down their division rival, reigning champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm looking here at some of their signings, and literally their biggest one is Brandon Jones, the safety
Mm-hmm.
from the Dolphins, who didn't even have that great of a season. So yeah, they're depleted. Yeah, just
Yeah,
about almost all the positions. I'm not a big fan of almost any of
yeah,
them. I like Javonte and Jaleel. I think that's a solid backfield, but it's not like an A tier backfield.
yeah.
So I like that one a lot. And so that leads me to my biggest loser, the Dallas Cowboys. I think they were getting made fun of a lot, and they still are. Throughout the first few days of free agency, they just had about no moves, and we're like, "What's happening? You guys gotta get better." I mean, you got bounced in the first round again. What are you gonna do to improve? It didn't seem like you did anything. I mean, you cut Michael Gallup, so you lose the receiver there. I know that's for money reasons.
Mhm.
You lose Tony Pollard. Stephon Gilmore doesn't look like he's coming back. I know it looked like. I mean, I know you guys got to pay Dak and CD and Micah soon, but that only locks you up to not bring in more talent. And now they need a running back pretty desperately. They lost Tyron Smith to the Jets, which is a very underrated steal for New York. I know he was hurt a lot this year and over the last few years, but he on the field he's a very special player. And so Dallas didn't capitalize there, and now, like we said, Philly's a big winner of free agency. That only makes Dallas look worse, and I like Washington too as well. I think they made a lot of pretty solid moves. Plus, they have the second overall pick. So Dallas is looking not as pretty. They didn't make any big splashes. I'm looking here. I think they made like 7 total signings, and a lot of them are just re-signings. So it's tough. It's tough picking right there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, give me your 2 cents on what Dallas has done, or I guess lack of what they've done.
Yeah, I just feel like they weren't able to address the running back situation. There was reports about them possibly bringing back Zeke and Dalvin Cook, which I do think Dalvin Cook has a couple years left to him. They do need a wide receiver too. Um, Brandon Cooks is getting old. You mentioned they got rid of Gallup. We can't rely everything on CD. He had a tremendous year, but you got to be a little bit concerned on the wear and tear. You're also going to need to pay CD in a
Yeah,
couple, in a season or two, Justin, basically pretty soon. He might want something as soon as maybe this offseason. There's
maybe.
still a lot of time for a dynamic player in CeeDee Lamb who proved himself, this year. He can be one of the top receivers in the league. They need someone to pair up with them. They did have Ferguson, who I like, but that defense, Justin, takes a step back with Dan Quinn going to Washington as their head coach.
Yes.
I feel like Dan Quinn is one of the better coordinators. I know they didn't have a good wild card game uh, uh, defensively for the Cowboys. But they do need to add a little bit of talent. I'm not sure if they re-signed Stephon Gilmore. I think he's still out there, Justin.
He's
They
still
just
out
need to
there.
they just need to make some moves, Justin, just to get their defense back on check. I do have some confidence in their defense to pick back up where they left off as being one of the better defenses in the league. But offense, they just have to add more. That offense is taking a step back from where they were in that loss in the wild card against Green Bay. They need to add some more playmakers, Justin. Like I mentioned, Cooks is getting old. So maybe they should draft the receiver in the first round, like they did a couple years ago. They hit a home run getting CD Lamb. That fell to them, I think, all the way to like pick 19 or 20, Justin.
Yeah.
Definitely the Cowboys need to add some running back depth as well as wide receivers.
Yeah, yeah, and I know this is totally off topic, but I just looked it up. The Browns did sign Donta Foreman, so they got 4 running backs in that backfield, which
Mm,
only makes me think that they're scared for Nick Chubb's, health to start the year, because Foreman's essentially a lesser Nick Chubb. I mean, just a big back that can kind of bruise you down. So I'm interested. They got Foreman, Hines, Ford, and Chubb. It's more likely than not that one of them are not going to be on the roster by season start. But yeah, sorry, yeah, that's what I was
yeah,
looking up because I knew they signed an extra guy.
yeah.
But anyway,
Foreman's a solid back. Yeah,
he's
solid
solid.
back.
He's really solid. I
Yeah,
don't know, I don't know who I'd kick out of that backfield. Um, But yeah, anyway, okay. So now we're gonna move on to the last part of it. We got winners and losers, but we're gonna talk about singular players that kind of fit their fantasy value is boosted or at least not lost through the free agency moves. But yes, Janelle, give me who your third biggest one was. Uh,
Third biggest one. It's Will Levis, Justin. You got to think about it this way. Will Levis, he has quite the arm. He's not great, but he's pretty good. He had some struggles late in the season when him and Tannehill were kind of going back and forth as far as starting for the Titans. But like I mentioned in last episode, Will Levis has that game where he went off against the Falcons, and I feel like he's potentially to have that 3 or 4 times in this season. I love the Titans now. How as a team they're going up there as now they're going to be up there with Houston, Indianapolis as one of those tough teams in the AFC. Behind Brian Callahan as their head coach, I think that they're now in the upcome with Ridley and Hopkins, and now adding Tony Pollard to go along with Tajay Spears. They can always develop somebody at the tight end position. This now elevates Will Levis now as a pretty decent, QB2, Justin, as far as
yeah,
fantasy. A good quarterback to fill in on buys. If your starter's on bye, your starter just has like a good matchup. Or Justin, if your starter has a weird Thursday night matchup, we know how weird Thursday nights can get as far as fantasy. Will Levis could always have that shootout potential. Low end QB1, but pretty good QB2. He has two good receivers, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, and the new coaching staff. So I love Will Levis. He's one of the winners here in free agency.
yeah, I have him right there too. I have him penciled in at 3.
Mm-hmm.
Levis is just, I mean, for fantasy purposes, obviously he doesn't have that rushing upside, which will not put him in the QB1 discussion for me. But he was almost well outside of the QB2 discussion
Mm-hmm.
before this, this free agency period hit. But yeah, Ridley gets an upgrade. He's going to have an improved O line after free agency. Tony Pollard, I mean, it looks a lot better than
Yeah,
we thought it would be. We got an offensive, coach in there, and so he's got, if they get into shootouts, maybe, and he definitely has the arm talent to, put up a lot of touchdowns. Obviously, in his first game, he had 4, and then obviously it dwindled down in his output from there. But he is a major winner. And they really paid up to get Calvin there, which makes me think that they're going to want to use this passing game a little bit more. And
yep,
now I think a downside too, people might say, is that if Hopkins deteriorates a little as his age, continues to go up,
yeah,
that could be something. But another thing I think is important is they ran the ball a lot with Derrick Henry being there. Now Derrick is out of town, and that might give them the reason to kind of lean on what Will can do with his weapons around him. So I had
yep,
him at 3. At my 2, I don't be mad. It's a little bit of a cop out because I have 2 guys here. I tied. 2 dudes are tied for second. Okay, first guy, Zamir White. Now, I'm somewhat convinced that they're going to bring in a guy in the draft that could
mm-hmm.
ruin this all in one swoop. In one card read by Roger Goodell.
Yeah,
But as of right now, he is alone and by himself. They brought in Alex Madison, but Madison doesn't, swing the needle for me.
yeah,
So Zamir White, he looked fairly good too when Jacobs was hurt in the back half of last year.
yeah,
And they've come out and support him as the option. They even said that Madison is going to be a depth piece. So Zamir White could be someone that is just, definitely a free agency riser. But as offseason continues, if a move's not made in the draft, he becomes maybe a low RB2 talk, maybe a middle RB2 talk because he's going to get the volume. So I like Zamir White a lot, but someone I couldn't decide who I liked more. Zach Moss changes teams. He's in Cincinnati now. I thought he was going to stay in Indy and be the backup, which means he has almost no value. Now he, you know, assumes Joe Mixon's role, and he played very well last year. So I like Zach Moss a lot. He's in a very good offense. Um, his receiving game, as we talked about, in the running back free agency episode, might be, a little bit less because they have a guy like Chase Brown that they can use. But touchdowns, I could see him getting, 15 to 20 carries a game. I'm a big fan of what Zach Moss can do, and same with Zamir White. But yeah, who'd you have at 2, or what are your thoughts on Zamir White and Zach Moss?
Yeah, no, I like both of them. Zamir White, you can argue, Justin, he was a fantasy league winner. He had a good last couple games in the year. Even that Christmas Day game against the Chiefs, he was absolutely balling. Um, and Zach Moss, I'm a little skeptical about how he's going to do in this offense. I'm not sure if this is too much pressure for him, but he's going to be good if he's able to do in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow what he did in Indianapolis. I mean, we're talking about a steal in fantasy drafts, Justin, with Zach Moss, who showed potential in Buffalo, showed a lot of potential last year with the Colts. Now he gets his chance to solidify himself as a starter. And, the more I think about it, the more I like it for Zach Moss. But Zamir White, he's going to be pretty good. You did mention that they could bring somebody in, Justin, from the draft, which would suck because I like Zamir White. He actually did good in replacement of Josh Jacobs when he was hurt.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
appreciate it. Yeah, that's all
Yeah,
all right down the middle. But yeah, okay.
yeah.
Who's at your 2?
My two. Okay. Now, Justin, I'm gonna make a little bit of an audible, but I have a one player that we'll mention when it's all done. But I have Jalen Hurts right here, Justin. We were talking about a little bit. I'm just gonna pretty much Jalen Hurts has Saquon Barkley. He has pretty much the same core. I like Devontae Smith, and AJ Brown's gonna have another really good season.
For sure.
I think the Eagles are motivated. I think that last year was such a bitter taste. The year before was a far more bitter taste, losing in the Super Bowl. I feel like the Eagles now, they have an identity a little bit now, and they're going to upgrade defensively. So that gives Jalen Hurts a pretty good defense, as well as many skilled playmakers. I feel like they're going to add more in the draft. They're possibly going to get a pretty good center to replace Jason Kelsey. That O-line's always going to be good. They're always going to have a pretty decent running game. So the Eagles did not take a step back at all. And Jalen Hurts gets a year wiser, more experience. He's solidified starter for Philly. So I think he's a big winner now, having a more elusive running game. Jalen Hurts is one of my winners in free agency.
Yeah, and I'm buying you a Jalen Hurts shirt. This is wonderful. You're all over the Eagles in this episode.
Yes,
That's
yes,
phenomenal. That is phenomenal hearing that. He's got it. I mean, and keeping the tush push around helps his value a whole ton. Yeah, and you mentioned earlier Devontae Parker. Yeah, just adding on that. There's a lot to love with Jalen, and yeah, even like the motivations of how bad last year ended for them. And the
yeah,
coordinator ads, I like it much better than
hmm
last year's trash cans of coordinator calls. So that's a
yeah,
good one.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna jump to my number 1. And my number 1, I kind of did not hesitate. It was right on the board when I had it. It's Drake London.
Uh-huh.
Drake London, I mean, in a similar spot as Garrett Wilson, just couldn't get a good quarterback, and that really hurt their values. And then also bad coaching. They always wanted to run the ball. Arthur Smith, evil Arthur, he always wanted to run the football. And you would look at it and you'd be like, Drake London had a very, high target share, but it wouldn't
Yeah,
matter. It would not matter. They barely threw the ball, and those throws were just mostly uncatchable or just not good. The offense was not good. They get Kirk Cousins, and this man to me jumps up to top 12 consideration at the wide receiver position. Maybe even I'll go with top 10. He's a top 10 wide receiver next year as long as Kirk Cousins is healthy. I love the new coaching staff, and Kirk still got it in him. I know the ACL injury, some might be worried, but I think what is he 35?
yeah.
So Drake London is by far my biggest winner. I mean, if they didn't have that quarterback upgrade, he'd be in my 30s or something like that. I have him right here around 10 or 11. So Drake London, the biggest winner that you could ever hope for out of free agency.
Yeah, Justin, I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you. I had Drake London at the top of my list too, Justin. When you think about the Falcons getting Kirk Cousins, you got to think about now this team's gonna be in a lot of potential shootouts, a
Yeah.
lot of come behind wins. Kirk Cousins is that quarterback during the regular season. He did have one of the greatest comebacks ever a few years ago. And wherever Kirk Cousins go, he always has that shootout capability, kind of like a Ryan Fitzpatrick did back when he was really good in fantasy. But Kirk Cousins now, Justin. He has Bijan Robinson out of the backfield with Algier. And then you have Drake London, Mooney, Rondale Moore, Ray McLeod, who's also pretty good in San Francisco, and Kyle Pitts, who has the potential to be a top 5 tight end. Um, this team is going to be high flying all over the board, and Drake London is the number one guy, no doubt, as a receiver. And you got to look at what Kirk Cousins is able to do in the past. He was able to develop a guy like Adam Thielen. I remember when he first came into Washington, he had guys like Santana Moss, like Pierre Garçon, who were pretty decent. Kirk Cousins was able to get them the ball. He went to Minnesota, had Diggs for a little bit, and then got obviously Justin Jefferson, and even made Osborne and Jordan Addison look pretty good. And so you got to believe that with this new team, Drake London is going to be able to get a lot of production from Kirk Cousins. There's going to be a lot of shootouts, especially, Justin, towards the end of the year where this division gets very tight and the Falcons are trying to win the division. And not only that, trying to get a third or second seed. So I love Drake London. He's going to be a pretty interesting to see where he goes, Justin. But Drake London is probably one of the biggest winners in free agency.
Yeah, you dove right into my brain with that Pierre Garçon call out. Oh my gosh, I remember that guy. But anyway, honestly, Drake London's going to go in that. I think so. I mean, Garrett Wilson last year with the hype of Aaron Rodgers would go in that like second round, either late or early. It would depend on who loves him as much. I think Drake London falls right in there now. I think he's got what it takes to do it in an offense with a good quarterback. Please, Kirk Cousins, don't get injured because we don't want to see whoever gets to back up Kirk Cousins. So
Taylor Heineke.
Oh God, please no, please no. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Well, I'm so sad that we have to actually jump to losers now because that just made me so sad. Anyway, all right, to the losers, and we'll go a little bit faster on this one so we can get under an hour. I got 3 guys, right? We both got 3 guys, and it's funny because all these guys last year were teammates. I'm gonna start out with my third one, and we got Austin Eckler. He is my third loser. I look at it as this guy was a perennial RB1. I mean, the last couple of years, obviously, this last year wasn't super great for him, but now he has a subsidiary role with, being the second fiddle to Brian Robinson, who is just the better running back now at Austin Eckler's age. But now a guy that was just say RB3 last year going into the season, now he's looked at as RB 20 something, maybe even not in the RB 30s. So I think he's a loser. Even though I did predict he would go to Washington, it doesn't mean that his fantasy value would jump up by going there. And he's going to have a rookie quarterback if the team is struggling. I don't know. So I am not a huge fan of Austin Eckler's fantasy value heading into next year. What are your thoughts with Eckler?
It's really tough to say because I do think Eckler has potential to be good, but we're not sure if he's going to be a consistent, RB2 week in and week out. Just because him and Robinson sort of play the same, they're able to catch out of the backfield. They're very sneaky when they run. It's going to be very hard to really dictate how it's going to be the same thing how it was years ago when it was Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick kind of going back and forth in Washington. But these are 2 better running backs. It just all comes down to if there's an injury. If there's an injury to one of these guys, unfortunately, the other guy boosts up automatic to RB1. But it sucks that they have 2 good running backs. I would have liked to see Eckler kind of somewhere else, like Minnesota or maybe even like Cincinnati. But yeah, he is a loser just because Brian Robinson is the younger guy. He's been there, in Washington. He was kind of the fan favorite after his, incident a couple years ago. So I do kind of agree with you that Eckler is a loser just because I don't think he's going to get the volume off the bat. And not only that, it's very confusing on where we draft him in fantasy. So definitely not the biggest fan of Eckler. I'd like that he's in Washington to pair up with the potential, rookie quarterback. But how much, can he do with Robinson possibly ahead of him?
For sure. Yeah, we kind of aligned there on those thoughts. And Eckler's just getting old. He might not have the juice anymore. So, yeah. Okay, who's your third guy, as a loser?
Okay, so my third guy is Josh Allen, Justin. So here's the deal. Okay, look, I've always said this consistently since we started this, Justin. I am not sure what the relationship is between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. They lose a guy like Gabe Davis, who looked like could be Josh Allen's go-to guy. He's gone. They do bring in Curtis Samuel, who I like. They do have Dalton Kincaid, but Justin, they need that number one guy. They could not be Kansas City with how this offense is built. They need a number one guy. And in the draft, they're going to need to make a move, trade down a little bit. I think they can land a Dunze maybe if he falls a little bit. They also need a power back. I do love James Cook, but when you got to remember, in Buffalo, when it gets cold towards the end of the year, you're going to need that bruiser to get you 20 to 25 carries to move the ball for Josh Allen. They weren't able to do that in the second round against the Chiefs. It's really tough to really pinpoint who's going to be that number one guy Josh Allen, a top 3 quarterback, goes to in key situations. Fantasy wise, Justin, we're not really too excited about all these receivers. I just believe that they need to add somebody. It's a sneaky offense. They did get rid of a lot of guys on their defense, so we're not really sure if they're going to be good defensively as well. So you can make the argument that Josh Allen could get into shootouts, but how well is his talent going to be that he's going to be throwing to?
Definitely. I think I hadn't had him on my radar as much, but looking at it, the Bills are some pretty big losers. And
Yeah,
even we saw the news, Damian Harris retired, who they had thought to be their power back heading into last year. Obviously had the season-ending injury, but they have a lot of holes now, and a team that
yeah.
we thought was fully ready to face off against the Chiefs, they lost, and now they're even worse than they were in the playoffs. So Josh Allen, that's a pretty good one. Obviously, he's still in those QB1 range, top 5, top 6, but it could start sliding if they get rid of Diggs. I know that was a rumor,
Yeah.
so a lot could happen not in Josh Allen's favor. So I like that. I like that answer. All right, give me your number 2.
Number 2, I think we can probably agree on this. It's Justin Herbert. I just feel like, they just have lack of offensive talent. I'm very scared to see what they're going to do in the draft. They don't get a receiver in that first round. Justin, I'm very concerned for the Chargers, especially Justin Herbert stock in fantasy. So I'm not really happy with what the Chargers are doing.
Yeah, that's. I mean, we talked about him a little bit earlier, so we can shorten that. He's my number 1. Now, to me, a guy that was maybe in the QB 5 to 7 to 8 range, I'd rather have a guy like Kirk Cousins over him now,
Yeah.
maybe even Aaron Rodgers. It just because he just doesn't have a lot, of targets to handle out, and the fact that this scheme is probably going to be set forth as a run first team now, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting with Greg Roman at the helm and Jim Harbaugh. So yeah, it's not pretty, and a guy that doesn't have a lot of rushing upside for fantasy. He's kind of he needs to give you those big yards and big touchdown games, but without the talent around him, it's very questionable. So yeah, I had him at 1. I'll throw you my number 2, and then you can give me your 1. My number 2 was Keenan Allen, a guy that had arguably his career season, was a top 10, top 8 wide receiver in fantasy football. Number 1 to Justin Herbert, now moves to a team with, semi-bad coaching, a rookie quarterback, and now what it looks to be as he'll be the number 2 option in the offense. Keenan Allen's value drops. He's another year older. And just, I mean, being the number 2, it's definitely a damning thing, especially because he was essentially by himself for most of the season once Mike Williams got injured last year.
Mm-hmm.
So Keenan Allen, I'm very skeptical on what his fantasy impact could be this year. I think he'll be a more of aid to Caleb Williams than he will be on his own. So I have him at number 2, and then as I mentioned, I had Herbert at 1. What are your thoughts on Allen? And then after that, give me your number 1.
Yeah, I'm not too down on Keenan Allen. It sort of reminds me a little bit of kind of how when the Texans had Hopkins and they ended up drafting Deshaun Watson, they kind of paired that to a veteran, receiver to go along with the young quarterback. I like Keenan Allen. I don't think he'll be as good as DJ Moore, but I like Keenan Allen to have a pretty decent year. Not too bad with the Bears. But Justin, my number 1 guy is actually Kyler Murray, kind of a guy who hasn't really been getting much attention. And now, you know how much I love Jalen Hurts. He has my sweet spot. But Kyler Murray as well, I believe in, no matter how bad the team is. I was able to see Kyler Murray. He was a former Aggie, Justin. Not bad. Didn't get much playing time. Transferred to Oklahoma. Won the Heisman. He was just spectacular in Oklahoma. And when he, comes to Arizona, he has some pretty good moments. We mentioned, that Hail Mary against Buffalo, led the Cardinals to the playoffs. But now, Justin, this team has stepped back from being that playoff team just a few years ago. And now, in the past couple of years, they've lost Hopkins. Hollywood Brown is now a Chief. And Rondell Moore, got traded to Atlanta. And they get Ritter, a backup quarterback. It just doesn't make sense. You don't get Kyler Murray, a weapon. Now, they have Trey McBride, who could be pretty good. But, Justin, look at this wide receiver room. They have Michael Wilson, who is okay. Greg Dortch was hurt most of last year. Chris Moore, who we haven't really heard of since he was in Baltimore. Zach Pascal and Jeff Smith. I mean, Justin, this is just atrocious. And looking at the running back spot, James Conner's getting older. So we're not really sure, how that offense, in a division, Justin, that's pretty wide open with the 49ers kind of going downhill. Seattle going up with the Rams going up. I'm just very disappointed how the Cardinals weren't aggressive at all. They do have the 4th pick, so if they don't get Marvin, it has to be Malik Neighbors. Otherwise, this team is going to be a top 5, picking in the first round next year. So I'm really down on the Cardinals. Don't understand why they would trade Rondell Moore for a backup quarterback. That hurts Kyler Murray in my position. Kyler Murray is a pretty good quarterback and a pretty good system, but I just don't think he can move the ball with these, pass catchers.
Yeah, that wide receiver room is just awful. I mean, Mike Wilson impressed with what he put out, and then of course they have Trey McBride.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Dortch had moments, but he's not a sustainable piece. So
yeah,
if they don't get a guy at 4, if they trade out of 4, I know the wide receiver class this year is fairly deep, but why not? Why would you not want to get the best, arguably the best talent in the draft, and Marvin Harrison Jr. So I don't know. I mean, time will tell, but yeah, just off of free agency looks, he is a major loser. And even though, the Cardinals have backed him up, they did trade for a backup quarterback. So it's questionable. They're a loser right now. Kyler's a loser. So I like that one a lot. That's a very good take you made. But yeah, that wraps up our episode. Wow. We flew by it. We're an hour in, but still it was a lot of fun, a lot of losers, a lot of winners. And we can't wait for next week. We'll discuss more of what we're gonna, hash out with each other, and not hitting anything, but we might have some new faces joining us, or at least guest appearing as we get on to continue, growing out this podcast because it's only going one way, and that is up. We're so thankful. If you want any Dween Sports merch, come holla at us. And you guys, you have a wonderful day. Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dween Nation, we love you guys. Thanks for the support, man. And hey, the season is getting closer and closer, than we know it. And hey, it's gonna be so excited to cover the draft, Justin, in just a month from right now. And I cannot wait. Dween Nation, we love you guys, and peace.
Peace.